Storytime about the 2-year-old boy who lost his life at the Pittsburgh Zoo. On a Sunday morning, a mother decided that she was going to take her son to the zoo. Everything was going good until they had gotten to the wild African dog exhibit. I'm going to insert a picture of what it looks like right here. On both sides of the exhibit, there was plexiglass. But looking straight out into the exhibit, there was no glass. They also had a roughly 4.5-foot railing there. Well, as most parents do whenever they take their children to the zoo, they pick them up so that way they can get a better look at the animals. Well, this mom had an idea of standing her child up onto the railing, get a better look at the dogs. Now, me personally, I have been to that zoo before. There are many signs saying not to lean over or set your child onto the railing. Well, in an instant, her child had lunged forward, and she had accidentally let go of him. At 11:45, her child had dropped 10 feet down into the dog enclosure. A few seconds later, the people around her had went to get employees. But by that time, the dogs had already gotten to the 2-year-old boy. Like for part 2. Part 2 about the 2-year-old boy who lost his life at the Pittsburgh Zoo. So like I said, she had dropped her child into the exhibit, and by that time the dogs already got to him. As soon as this happened, visitors went and told the employees. Shortly after, zookeepers were able to call off several of the dogs, and they had immediately went back into the building. 3 more were eventually drawn from the child, but the last dog was very aggressive and the police had to shoot the animal. The father soon arrived at the scene, and after the mother and father were taken to the hospital for immediate trauma therapy. Since the exhibit opened in 2006, USDA had conducted over 35 inspections on that exhibit, and none of those times did they decide that it was unsafe. And this situation happened in 2012. Parents decided to sue the zoo in May of 2013. In court, the mother had argued that the zoo had failed miserably to prevent the attack. And this is what the zoo said. This was caused because of the mother's negligence and carelessness. I'm going to tell you guys my opinion real quick. I think it's the mother's fault. What do you guys think?
Once there was a girl named Jenny. She was like all the other girls except for one thing. She always wore a green ribbon around her neck. There was a boy named Alfred in her class. Alfred liked Jenny, and Jenny liked Alfred. One day he asked her, "Why do you wear that ribbon all the time?" "I cannot tell you," said Jenny. But Alfred kept asking, "Why do you wear it?" And Jenny would say, "It's not important." Jenny and Alfred grew up and fell in love. One day they got married. After their wedding, Alfred said, "Now that we're married, you must tell me why you have that green ribbon." "You must wait," said Jenny. "I will tell you when the right time comes." Years passed. Alfred and Jenny grew old. One day, Jenny became very sick. The doctor told her that she was dying. Jenny called Alfred to her side and said, "Now I can tell you about the green ribbon." She told him to untie it so he could see why. And Jenny's head fell off.
Story time about how I got caught skipping school almost every day of my senior year. So our school had just started this new thing where you fill out all your contact information online. And my dad was like, "Okay, yeah, just fill yours out." And it pretty much was who can pick you up, who can make early dismissals for you, who they can call if you're in trouble. Well, I decided to be a sneaky little bastard and put my boyfriend in for every single one of those contacts. I would start school around 7:30 a.m. and I would go to the nurse's office at like 9 a.m. and she would call and my boyfriend would act like my dad and be like, "Okay, yeah, just let her drive home." Well, my guidance counselor noticed after about 3 months of me never being at school. So she called the number hoping to speak to my dad, but instead she got my boyfriend. And he just thought it was a random person, so he didn't act like my dad, because neither of us knew. Like for part 2. Okay, part 2. Okay, so pretty much what happened after that is she called and like she found out that it wasn't my dad. And then she went digging and like she like called my sister to the office and she was like, "What's your dad's phone number?" And my sister was like, "Why? Like, don't you guys have it?" She gave her my dad's number. And so my sister told me whenever she got home, so I went to school the next day. And it was like a surprise party whenever I walked in the office. The dean was there, the principal was there, and my guidance counselor. So I got in trouble and then they were like, "Oh, we're calling your dad." So what did I do? I left before they called him.
This story time is about how I found out my sister was being bullied. I was in 7th grade and my sister Trina was in 6th. She was cross-eyed and was so scared to finally go to middle school. But I didn't play about my sister. She know what I do. Now, I made friends a lot easier than her, so after we already got used to the school and everything, I would forget to check in with her every now and then to see how Everything was going for her. Until me and a couple of my friends were walking by the bathroom. And I hear these girls in the bathroom saying, "Can you see this? Can you see that?" I was like, oh, see, no. Y'all gonna bring out the worst in me today. So I walk in the restroom and I see my sister Trina sitting on the floor crying. All of her stuff is dumped out of her backpack. And I see one girl recording. As soon as she saw me, she turned that camera off and took off. Now, I don't want to be too explicit about what I did. She saw God that day. And I let Trina get a few licks in too. I said, "Trina, make her pick up all your stuff." She was crying, picking up all the stuff. She ain't want no problems after that.
Story time about my psychotic best friend. So we're gonna call this girl Gia. So a little background information. This all happened whenever I was in 9th grade. I saw Gia sitting at this lunch table alone and I invited her to come sit with my friends and I. And after talking to her, I found out that she was a new student and she didn't have any friends. So her and I started hanging out and we became really close. Like, she would come over my house 24/7. Well, my older sister was a grade above us and she would act really weird around her. And by weird, I mean like she would always make fun of me in front of my sister. And weirdly enough, try to cause problems between us. My sister didn't really like her. She thought that she was weird. But because she was my friend, she was being super nice to her. Well, like a month later, she started trying to become best friends with my sister. Like any conversation she would have, I would be like, "Oh, do you want to come over?" She would be like, "No, sorry, I'm hanging out with your sister today." And I would go home and I would be like, "Hey, are you hanging out with Gia today?" And my sister would be like, "What are you talking about?" Like for part 2. Part 2 about my psychotic best friend. So like I said, my sister was like, "No, what are you talking about?" So at this point, I'm thinking, oh, this girl's really weird. But it gets even worse. She comes over my house one day to hang out with me and goes in my sister's room the whole time. My sister dyed her hair black, so what does she do? She dyes her hair black too. The obsession was like really weird. So I told her to leave. Next day, I got a whole paragraph of her saying that she just wanted to be like my sister because she never had an older sister.
This story time is about how my friends tried to drown me. By the way, this story is anonymous. So my dad's job relocated him and that meant we had to go to a new school. I was trying so hard to fit in, I ended up finding the wrong crowd. First day comes around and I'm at lunch. And this boy named Raul comes up to me asking me if I'm doing okay. So we start chatting it up and I notice these 5 girls see us at the table. I walk up to the table and just interrupt our conversation and say, "Hey girl." Then this one blonde girl named Sarah asked me, "Do you know him?" Like, "No, I just met him." And she's like, "Well, I see that you're new, so you can hang out with us, okay?" I was so happy because I had a group of friends on the first day. Sometime later, me and Raul start to like each other. I told my new friends who I liked. And Sarah, which was the queen bee of the group, she goes, "Who cares?" Part 2 story time about how my friends tried to drown me. By the way, this story is anonymous. That awkward little moment with Sarah, some weeks went by. So she finds me by my locker and she goes, "Hey girl, Raul is letting us borrow his boat for the weekend. Want to come out with us?" I'm like, "Of course I want to go out. Are you kidding me?" The following weekend comes for us to go and she goes, "Oh, and make sure you don't bring a bathing suit. We're just going to be sitting on the boat." Like, okay. The day comes and we're all excited and we're cruising out there. So we get damn near in the middle of the sea and Sarah turns off the boat. Everyone's looking at me. She goes, "So you like Raul, huh?" I'm like, "Sarah, what's going on?" And her friends then throw me out of the boat. He then tries to run me over. So I stayed under the water and swam away as fast as I could. I got to the land, I called Raul. Once he came and got me, we reported them and they all got expelled.